if you look at Marcelo, he looks like quite an unassuming, very conservative, doesn't he? And yet you learn this about him and you think, hang on. And then you hear about his attitude to winemaking and it all makes sense. This is a man who, when I emailed him to give me some information about this tasting, he said, I'm just on the shores of the Black Sea in Georgia. Can I get back to you in a couple of hours? He's constantly traveling. He's always trying to find the next thing. He went on a trip to taste nothing but natural wines, and that's where this wine came from, about a couple of years ago. So he's a man, I don't think in Chile many people get the chance to travel very much. Marcelo does. For him, it's super important. Every year he goes on a trip. And he's very, very influential. I've pictured him here with his new foudre, which he's very proud of, and his tinajas. Tinajas, these clay. I don't really know the proper word for these sort of vessels. I can't pronounce the Georgian version. Tinajas is nice. They're not really amphorae, are they? If anyone can give me a word afterwards, it would really help. But anyway, he, in 2011, decided to have a complete step change, to get away from what he felt was standardizing forces in wine. New oak barrels. He's not buying any new oak anymore. He's just using these foudre and the tinajas and the stainless steel and the old barrels that he has. He is not using enzymes, cultured yeast, herbicide, microoxygenation, and he's picking all his reds about a month earlier than he had been doing before. For the whole range, and we're talking especially the icons here. This in Chile and South America is akin to some sort of winemaking heresy. And yet you taste his wines, and they're wonderful. And in that sense, he's hugely influential. He's not afraid to take risks. He describes the Roland style of viticulture, rightly or wrongly, as easier. You wait to pick, you pick when it's fully ripe, you add a bit of acidity, it's safe, it's fine, it's good, tastes nice. Picking early is much more of a risk. You've got to get it just right, and you've got to get it just right with your viticulture. It's harder, you have to live in the field, but when it works, it makes a much more drinkable wine. And I think drinkability and refreshment value is something we don't often talk about with New World wines, and I think it's very, very important. And I think this wine is all about that refreshment value. It's what I call the Mies van der Rohe style of winemaking. Less is more. And this wine encapsulates that. This wine is from Guariliwe, one of the most impossible to pronounce areas in Chilean wine. It's in Itata, a valley that most people have completely forgotten about, very far west in rolling hills in the coast from old 30-year-old bush vines of Sanso. These are the sort of areas the big wineries pay to put in their Tetra Pak wines in Chile, which I've enjoyed many a time. But they pay about 160 pesos per kilo for this fruit. Marcelo came along, recognized the value of this, and he's paying 400, so 3 times as much. So it's good for the economy of the area as well. Pedro said this is my favorite terroir in Chile. Classical Tuscan slopes, very old granites, and it gives a sort of tension in the tannins. And you do get, I think, with this wine, a little bit of furriness, a little bit of good acidity, and there's definitely some structure, some substance to it. It's not just lively, light berry fruits. It has a food friendliness and a savouriness to it. How much of that comes from the clay jars, I don't know. But he basically put whole berries in the clay jars and left it. His main issue was how is he going to seal it over the winter? And I think his initial solution to that was finding some old sort of plastic bin lids and bicycle glue. So if you get whiffs of bicycle glue, I don't know if you use it on this vintage, but there you go. It's pretty Heath Robinson stuff. It's experimental, but it's exciting in terms of what potential it shows in the wine. And then finally, Aiju, another difficult to pronounce name. So a bit of an exclusive here. I don't know, has anyone else tried this before? A couple of people may well have tried it. Claudio, you know, hugely knowledgeable about Chilean wine, didn't know this wine existed. It doesn't really exist, this wine. It shouldn't really exist. But I talk about terroir as a personality, as a story. And this wine has a great story. And I think we could use more stories in Chilean wine. This wine is from the heart of the Atacama Desert, as I said. A couple of maps here. They're probably a bit busy and confusing. But essentially to say, some wines are described as coming from the Atacama. They generally tend to be on the fringes. The Elqui Valley is on the fringes, the southern fringes of the Atacama. It's incredibly dry, incredibly bright. This is completely different. If you look on the left, on the Chilean wine map, most of the vineyards are huddled in a sort of fairly similar area. But this is kind of that, all of that, again, to the north. It's, you know, totally off the charts. Has anyone been to the Atacama Desert? It's an amazing place. Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it? It's stunning. This wine is grown at 2,500 meters altitude in the Atacaman Altiplano. The vineyard has 400 vines. The man who grows them is old. He's deaf, and he has no working toilet in his house. I don't know why that's important, but I thought I'd get it in there. His name is Juan Espíndola, which is proudly on the bottle. This is a social aid project. There's a lot of mining in the Atacama Desert. To get the rights to mine there, companies have to invest in the local community. And often they give people things they can make a business out of. So a lot of people have been given vines, and this vineyard was a gift to this individual. The winemaking is very rudimentary. Alvaro Peña, one of the sort of silent heroes of Chilean wine, professor of enology at the university, the Catholic University, was brought in quite early. He helped with a lot of these things because it's Chile's heritage. There is a lot of history to wine in the Atacama Desert. You find lots of old wine presses, and lots of old vines. But it's not really made in any sort of serious quantities.